Thank you for joining us for today's episode. I am your host, Bart Voss. Today's topic, the NCAA Tournament and March Madness. I am crazy excited about this episode. I am a huge sports fan, and March Madness is absolutely one of my favorite things. It's been a tradition of mine and some friends to get together for the tournament for the first couple of rounds, meet up somewhere across the country. All the friends are coming from around the country, and drink copious amounts of alcohol and just really live it up. So I'm a huge fan of this tournament, and I am super depressed that it got canceled this year with the coronavirus. So in honor of the tournament and its existence, I wanted to do a show on it. Let's talk about the phrase March Madness to kick things off, though, because officially it's the NCAA tournament. So where did this term March Madness actually originate from? And even though the tournament started in 1939, it was in 1982 when Brent Musburger used the phrase March Madness on the air. It was immediately coined, it's been trademarked, and it's been really used ever since then. Going back to the very beginning, the tournament was founded in 1939. In that first year, there were 8 teams that were part of the tournament. It was created by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA, and specifically it was the idea of Ohio State's coach, Harold Olson, to actually have the tournament. In that very first year, it was the University of Oregon and the Ducks that won the tournament in that inaugural time out. Since then, we've seen 11 different expansions to the current 68 teams that we see today. With those 68 teams, what it amounts to is a 7-round single elimination tournament. You've got the play-in game, a couple of the first rounds, and then the titles that you know about, the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final 4, and the championship game. But how the heck do you even get in the tournament in the first place? Prior to 1975, you actually only had one team per conference that was allowed in. It was your conference champion that got into the tournament. However, several high-profile teams were left out as the second-best team was better than a lot of other teams in the country. So in 1975, that's when one of the expansions happened and the tournament went to 32 teams, and the conference champions plus at-large bids were added for the very first time. The process of seeding actually wasn't added until 1978, but currently under the system that we have today, 32 champions of each of the division conferences are let in, plus 36 teams that have at-large berths. The conference champions are easy to decide because that's just the teams that win the championship game. But how are those at-large bids and berths decided? Well, there's a selection committee that the NCAA uses. It's made up of 10 athletic directors and commissioners from different schools around the country. These members are chosen by the NCAA after they've been nominated by their school. Once they're put on that board, on this selection committee, they serve 5-year terms. They try to select these people from all different areas of the country so that different schools, many different areas are represented when they are choosing these selections and choosing the seating. If one of the commissioners, let's say it's Duke's athletic director, is in the room as one of the members of the selection committee and they need to talk about Duke to decide where they're going to be seated, that athletic director and that member of the committee is required to leave the room so that there's not any bias on where they're going to get seated, where they're going to get placed. Ultimately, this group needs to make their final decision by what's known as Selection Sunday, what you've all heard of. This is when the brackets are released to the public, and frankly, this is when all the gambling starts. In fact, it's estimated that 47 million Americans gamble on the NCAA tournament, and the total amount wagered is actually in the ballpark of $8.5 billion. Billion with the B, $8.5 billion. And in addition to that, because of all the people watching the games and gambling on it, U.S. corporations lose somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.9 billion in productivity because so many people are watching the games and keeping up with their brackets. I know definitely I've been a part of that problem. I've been watching the games at work and I've done that as well. What's funny about it, though, is you see all these different bracket challenges. I know Berkshire Hathaway does a perfect bracket challenge every year. Yahoo, ESPN, those things do the same. And to actually get a perfect bracket, it's roughly a 1 in 9 quintillion chance that you're going to get a perfect bracket. So it goes million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, then quintillion. 1 in 9 quintillion chance that you're going to have a perfect bracket. And to put it in perspective a little bit, To win the lottery, the Mega Millions or the Powerball, you've got about a 1 in 300 million chance to win that. So 1 in 300 million for the lottery, but a perfect bracket, 1 in 9 quintillion. However, I know that this is a ritual for many every single year. It's when you get to be a pundit, it's when you get to think you're an expert, it's when you get to compete with your friends. So just this ritual of doing this every single year and the gambling on it, it isn't going anywhere. I did want to look at, though, talking about rituals, a couple of the other things that you see in the NCAA tournament year in and year out. The first one I wanted to take a quick peek at was the cutting down of the nets. It's something you usually see on TV. The tradition of cutting down the nets began in 1947. NC State won a game. The coach, Everett Case, wanted to get a memento of the tournament. So he stood on the shoulders of one of his players and he cut down the net. It just grew in popularity since then to where we see it today. Historically, it's been at the end of the regional rounds and after the national championship game where you'd see those nets cut down, but anymore, basically every player wants a memento if they can get it. So you usually see this about after every single game now. And traditionally, it starts with the seniors, works its way down to the freshmen, and then the coach who are cutting down the net. And like I said, anymore, it's about after every game. Another tradition that takes place actually while the nets are being cut down after that national championship game is the song One Shining Moment. This started in the year 1987 where they played it and they showed a video montage of the champions while they were cutting the nets down. The song hasn't been used every single year, but largely it's been used more years than not, where they play this video montage, they play the song One Shining Moment. It's had some different iterations, including Luther Vandross doing one of them. But that song is a big tradition that you hear at the end of the tournaments as they're cutting those nets down, so you can see, again, that video montage of the championship team. We were talking about gambling earlier, though, and how hard it is to fill out a perfect bracket. And I want to talk about a couple of the reasons why that is. And looking at bracket busters and Cinderella teams. Two terms I'm sure you have heard if you've watched the tournament at all on TV. Starting with bracket busters, what these are essentially is when one of the top seeds or someone that is expected to go really far in the tournament busts out and loses early in the tournaments. These are the ones that make you rip your bracket up, throw crap at the TV, the foam bricks that you see, they piss you off, they ruin your bracket. For some reason, the one that always sticks out in my head was in 2001. It was Iowa State who lost to number 15 Hampton. Iowa State was ranked number 2, losing to number 15 Hampton in the first round. I lost a lot of money that year. I actually had Iowa State winning the entire thing, is how bad they broke my bracket, and I've habitually rooted against Iowa State ever since then. On the flip side of those bracket busters, you've got the Cinderella teams. Usually these Cinderella teams are the one that cause the bracket bust to actually happen. But this is when a low-ranked team goes way further in the tournament than they are expected to go. These are the underdogs, they're the fun ones to root for. A couple of the more recent ones I know you're going to remember, 2011, you had Virginia Gulf Coast VCU, and they went all the way to the Final Four as an 11 seed. And along the way, they beat Florida State and Kansas that year. And then in 2013, just a couple of years later, you had the big Florida Gulf Coast one. And they went to the Sweet 16 as the 15 seed. And they were the first 15 seed ever to make it that far in the tournament. And then just as we're winding down here, I'm going to give you a couple of fun facts and just statistics about the tournament. The winningest team ever in the tournament is UCLA. You remember the legendary coach John Wooden. Again, if you've watched the tournament at all, you've heard his name before. They have the most titles ever with 11 of them, including a string of 10 out of 12 years from 1964 to 1975. They won it 10 out of 12 years, just an absolute dominant run. Since they started the seeding, North Carolina is actually the team that has received the most number 1 seeds. They've had the number 1 seed 17 times. A couple of the teams that haven't fared so well, actually both a couple of smart schools too, Harvard and Dartmouth. Harvard is the team that had the longest drought ever of not appearing in the tournament. They went from 1946 to 2012 between tournament appearances. They went 66 years between appearances, which is the longest streak ever. Dartmouth currently has the longest streak, running at 59 years since they last appeared in the tournament. So the smart schools, not doing so good at basketball. In honor of the tournament not taking place this year, I hope this was a fun little dive into the history of the NCAA tournament. and March Madness. As we wrap up, though, in honor of the most prominent announcer in the history of the tournament, Dick Vitale, I wanted to leave you with this. It's awesome, baby! That's all for today, and thank you for joining us. As always, I am your host, Bart Voss, and this has been Today's Topic.